"It's all right, Mom will help," I told my husband as he left for Shanghai. My car was reported stolen. They cuffed me. "Your baby's alone," I screamed. CPS took her. Now I know why. That February afternoon, the icy wind stung my face as I drove back to my place after spending 6 weeks at my parents'. Sleeping soundly in the backseat, 2-week-old Sophia had her head resting on a special pillow. She seemed like an angel safely strapped into her car seat. Seeing her with David's bright blue eyes reminded me of my husband who wasn't with me. When I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror, the effects of giving birth were still visible. My slightly brown hair seemed a little worse for wear, and subtle dark circles were under my eyes. However, an unparalleled sense of joy washed over me. Throughout my 35 years, I'd never experienced such deep contentment. David had to leave on a surprise international business trip only a week before I was expected to give birth. This crucial project in Shanghai needed his particular skills as an investment analyst. His job with a large financial firm usually meant he took around 4 international trips yearly. Even though he tried to get out of it, I pushed him to go. "It's all right, my folks will help," I remember telling him. Looking back now, that turned out to be the correct call. My parents were a tremendous help, allowing me to approach giving birth with no worries. The gentle landscapes of Denver's peaceful residential area drifted past the car window. The houses in the Cherry Creek North District were lined up neatly, each one with well-kept gardens and a sophisticated look. I recalled the first day I met David, 3 years prior, at a Christmas charity function at St. John's Church in this very town. I was at a craft fair selling baby products that I'd made myself. "This might be ideal for my niece," the tall gentleman who came up to me said. That turned out to be David. He was wearing a navy suit and gave off an air of tranquility. I eventually found out that he actually didn't have a niece. It was just his way of initiating a chat. But somehow, that candid admission became a key reason I started to really like him. For the next half year, he courted me seriously. He continually asked me out for dates, especially around holidays, and he was always supportive of my work. After we'd been dating for half a year, we held a small wedding with only our immediate families and closest friends present. I still picture Elizabeth, David's mom, keeping a soft smile on her face throughout the whole ceremony as she sat next to me. Elizabeth used to be a bank branch manager. She was an intelligent, graceful woman. Though she was 63, she carried herself so well and always kept a certain space in her interactions with us. Having lost her husband when David was young, she'd raised him perfectly on her own. She was a neighbor of ours now, living by herself. We'd established a tradition of weekly dinners, and on the surface, we seemed to have created a perfect mother-in-law and daughter-in-law connection. My online shop continued to flourish after we got married. My handmade baby items got popular through recommendations, especially the nursing pillows and swaddle blankets. As the buzz expanded on social media, my yearly revenue reached $100,000. Right when the company I created from scratch began to flourish, I found out I was expecting. Upon hearing that I was pregnant, Elizabeth promptly started gathering baby supplies. "This has always been what I've wanted," she told me, with tears welling up as she began knitting a blanket. That blanket, created with pale blue and off-white yarn, eventually became Sophia's go-to comfort item. David, while amused by his mother's enduring attention to detail, was truly joyful. As I reached my 4th month, my nausea lessened, and I experienced many tranquil days. I kept working, and I also made preparations for the baby's arrival. I made sure to buy organic groceries from Whole Foods and tried to eat nutritious meals. At our family dinners, Elizabeth would share her insights about delivering a baby and raising a child. Despite the fact that some of her thoughts seemed a little outdated, I appreciated her genuine caring. During the weekends, we'd go to the neighborhood block parties. Our neighbors would always offer kind comments whenever they saw how big my belly was getting. The Johnsons, who lived across the street, were especially sweet to me. They always brought over homemade muffins. As my delivery date got closer, David found it challenging to change his work calendar. But unexpectedly, a big business trip abroad came up. Because of how well he had done at his job at the securities firm, he got selected for this important task. Although he considered turning it down, I urged him to go. If I had the baby at my parents' house, I knew I would have the help I needed. Plus, Elizabeth assured me that she'd be right over if I needed anything. Giving birth at my folks' place in Boulder went more smoothly than I'd anticipated. My mom handled my meals and made sure I was doing all right, and my dad took care of getting me to the hospital. Everything with the delivery went according to plan, and on January 15th, we had a healthy baby girl. She weighed the usual 7 pounds, and the doctor said everything was great. Because my parents helped out so much during those 6 weeks I spent recovering there, I could get back to feeling like myself, both physically and mentally, on my own schedule. And now I was heading home with my precious daughter. David was supposed to be back from Shanghai tomorrow, and I was so excited just thinking about starting our new life together as a family. Our final checkup at Rose Medical Center had gone well, and both Sophia and I got a clean bill of health. Denver's winter sky looked cloudy, like it might snow any minute, but inside I was filled with optimism, as if spring was just around the corner. They were saying there'd be a lot of snow tonight. I really needed to get home and get unpacked before it started. My dad carried all the bags out to the car, while my mom, holding Sophia, talked about how much she wanted to see the new grandbaby's room. It's true my folks hadn't actually seen the baby's room yet, the one we'd gotten ready before she arrived. There was light pink wallpaper, a white crib that David had put together when he wasn't working. Hanging from the ceiling was a handmade mobile, a gift from Elizabeth, gently moving in the air. "Come on in and have a look around, perhaps a cup of tea," I suggested, but my dad glanced out the window, glanced at his watch, and gave a little shake of his head. "They're predicting the snow will get worse. We ought to leave earlier than planned. Boulder is a significant drive." "You're absolutely correct," my mom replied, her face displaying a hint of sadness as she tenderly placed Sophia back in my arms. As I held her, I was reminded of the enormous amount of help my parents had given us in the last 6 weeks. "I can't thank you enough for watching over Sophia and me during the past 6 weeks. My voice got a little thick with emotion, and my mother offered a soft smile. "Naturally. Plus, we really loved spending time with such a precious granddaughter." Once I'd waved goodbye to my parents, I took a look around the house. After being away for 6 weeks, the rooms were a little dusty. Even though David was supposed to check on things during his business trip, a few things caught my eye, my womanly eye. There was a light coating of dust on the coffee table, and the leaves of the houseplants were visibly dusty. I should probably clean up a little before David gets back tomorrow. First, I should bring the luggage to Sophia's room and arrange everything we need. The bags from my parents' house were still sitting by the door. Baby clothes, folded carefully by my mom, and a mountain of diapers. It was going to be quite a chore to unpack. I figured it would be tough to organize everything with the baby in my arms, so I put Sophia in her crib. "Mommy's just going to do a little work, okay?" While I spoke, Sophia let out a gentle breath and slipped into a more profound slumber. Outside, the snow had started to come down. Little flakes kept sticking to the window glass and then dissolving. When morning arrived, the yard would likely be covered in a blanket of white. Before that, I needed to get the suitcases from the vehicle. That's right, my car. The car David used when he drove me to my parents' place for the birth should still be in the garage. I really should get the luggage inside it before David gets back tomorrow. We're going to need it for the baby's hospital visits and running errands. Plus, if it's going to snow pretty hard soon, it would be smart to keep the car outdoors. After doing a final check to confirm Sophia was still sleeping, I turned on the baby monitor. Tiny speakers were sending her even, rhythmic breaths. Even though I'd only be away from her for a brief time while I went to the garage, seeing my daughter's face, so peaceful in her sleep, reassured me everything would be okay. I walked out the front door and started towards the garage. Even though it was barely 2 in the afternoon, the sky felt unexpectedly dim. Heavy snow clouds were low in the sky, and a chilly breeze hit my face. I had to get the car out quickly and move the bags. I also knew I'd need to clear the snow that had gathered on the windshield. As soon as I opened the garage door and reached for the driver's side door, it began. Shattering the quiet, a sharp siren sounded all throughout the neighborhood. I caught a glimpse in the corner of my eye of 3 police cars speeding out from a side street and encircling my vehicle. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers were reflecting in the falling snow. Wait, what was going on? Cops with their weapons drawn started to take positions around the car, one after another. Everything seemed to be unfolding at a snail's pace. The actions of the police officers in uniform felt unreal. Was I dreaming? Perhaps the lack of sleep after having a baby was making me hallucinate. From inside the house, Sophia started crying. The sudden noise of the sirens must have frightened her. Her crying snapped me back to the harsh reality of the situation. They told me this car has been reported stolen. Those words from the officer hit me hard like a blast of freezing air. That's not right. This is, in fact, my car. The car's paperwork, the official documents, are inside the house. I shouted, frantic. Still, the officers showed no sympathy as they started putting the handcuffs on me. The coldness of the metal against my wrists confirmed this was real. I looked down at the papers that were shoved in front of my shaking hands. The signatures weren't familiar and the writing seemed impossible. Someone had changed the registration information for my car. My brain just went completely empty. This can't be happening. This is my car. Even my thoughts were shaky. But this was just the beginning of my troubles. Before they pushed me into the police car, I yelled with all my might. "My baby is in there. A 2-week-old baby is all alone. Please, my baby." For just a second, I could see a hint of hesitation on their faces, but they couldn't ignore procedure. They were taking me to the precinct. From the cruiser's backseat, I saw my home shrink in the distance. I could still hear Sophia's cries in my head. The interrogation room was so sterile, so starkly white. The harsh overhead lights amplified the bizarre feeling of it all. No matter how much I elaborated, the detectives kept asking their questions robotically. I was completely overwhelmed by fear and nervousness. What was happening to Sophia, my baby? She was just a tiny 2-week-old, alone in the house. I also couldn't get a hold of David. He was supposed to be flying back from Shanghai. My phone showed more than 10 calls I'd missed. My parents also needed to know. This had to be some kind of error. It is my car. All the paperwork was completed correctly. But that isn't my signature. Someone must have forged it. Then why is your vehicle the subject of a stolen vehicle report? The questioning went on, but my thoughts were completely consumed by Sophia. Was she crying? Was she hungry? Was she cold? It had to have been about 2 hours since I last fed her. I was furious with the ridiculousness of it all, plus I was utterly worried about my daughter. Tears began to stream down my face, but I couldn't break down now. I had to explain everything as rationally as I could. Just then the door to the room opened. As for the baby, we've gotten in touch with Child Protective Services. My heart nearly stopped when I heard those words. It felt like my world quietly fell apart. Even though the phrase Child Protective Services was still ringing harshly in my mind, the interrogation room's door swung open, and a detective wearing a suit walked in. Her pale blue suit felt surprisingly appropriate in this stark setting. "Mrs. Martin, I'd like to clear up the situation," she announced. A bulky file was already resting on the desk. She took some papers from it. The papers included the purchase agreement, registration documents, and the report regarding the stolen vehicle that was causing trouble. Her organized approach demonstrated the thoroughness of their investigation. "First, let's talk about the timing. Why now, right after you had your baby?" I considered this question carefully. The car had been sitting in the garage for 6 weeks, so why did this all come up now? As a matter of fact, the stolen vehicle report was about a car. The vehicle had been idle in my garage for 6 weeks. So why today? So why now? The report was submitted the day following my delivery. Those words caused an unpleasant feeling of coldness to course through me. The day after the birth. At that moment, I was in the hospital bed with my newborn Sophia in my arms. David had already flown to Shanghai. How could anyone have known the timing? The list of potential sources was very short, I realized. The papers had an official DMV employee's stamp. Nevertheless, the detective laid the documents out in front of me. The signatures had been examined, and the handwriting analysis showed definite signs of being fake. I let out a surprised breath. Next to the signature, there was an unfamiliar seal. However, the seal looked legitimate. It seemed as though all the rules had been followed. This would be impossible without someone on the inside at the DMV helping out. A memory from the hospital then popped into my head. It was the day Elizabeth came to see me and offered to hold my bag and car keys, explaining that she'd go check on my home. Plus, she used to be a bank branch manager, which means she likely has a lot of contacts in banks. Some intriguing video footage was discovered from the garage security camera. The detective was using a tablet looking at the screen. The night before I had the baby, somebody went up to my car. The camera showed the person from behind. Though because of the angle and the poor lighting, it was impossible to see their face. Still, the way they walked seemed familiar to me. It was that very graceful walk with a straight back. According to what the neighbors said, a car that nobody knew had been driving in and out of the neighborhood quite a few times that day. Specifically, the Johnsons offered a particularly interesting statement. The detective then pulled out some fresh notes. Late at night, a black sedan kept driving by over and over again. The driver was a middle-aged woman, someone they often saw in the area. Next, a bank report appeared on the screen. There was proof of huge amounts of cash being taken out of my account, but I was absolutely in the hospital at that exact time. The documents had signatures that were expertly faked. They flawlessly copied those little details of how things work, something only an ex-bank employee would understand. Moreover, we got some very intriguing testimony from the hospital staff. The detective opened up a new page in the file. A woman who visited me often while I was in the hospital was, it seems, continually trying to get personal details from the nursing staff. What sort of things was she after? Things like the doctor's availability, who was working nights, the ins and outs of the security cards, and other very specific data that a regular visitor just wouldn't be concerned with. It was at that point that everything finally clicked. That shady figure I saw the evening before my delivery. The unusual money withdrawals, her strange actions at the hospital, and now I understood what Elizabeth was really after underneath all her pretended niceness. How she'd nonchalantly reviewed documents bearing my signature during our regular weekly dinners. How she tried to find out about my financial past by casually chatting with me, and her strangely familiar way of talking to everyone at the hospital. This felt like more than just chance. The detective whispered it to me. Someone plotted this whole thing, and it was all timed to when I would give birth. And that person has a deep knowledge of my life. I was shaking with fear. I was suddenly flooded with memories of Elizabeth's behavior. I remembered her sweet smile at the wedding, her caring attitude at our dinners every week, how excited she was when I announced my pregnancy, her exact words before I gave birth, "I'll be there right away if you need me." And now David's trip abroad, could that have been part of the plan too? A mother can influence a son, and a son's heart, more than anyone else. I remembered seeing Elizabeth talking in a friendly way with the receptionist at Rose Medical Center. She mentioned that they'd been clients of hers back when she worked in banking. I wondered if she had been cultivating these relationships for ages, all for some scheme like this. Was all of this just a facade, or was somebody else pulling the strings? The detective's voice, Mrs. Martin, broke into my thoughts. Do you know anyone around you who could carry out such a carefully planned scheme? Someone who understood both the Department of Motor Vehicles and the world of finance. I didn't want to give an answer. I really didn't want to utter that name, but for Sophia, for our family, my mother-in-law, my voice shook just a little bit. Elizabeth Martin, she used to manage a bank branch and she knew a lot of people. The room where we were being questioned felt as though the air had suddenly gotten cold. The detective put her pen down and stared directly at me. Could you tell us more about Elizabeth Martin? Just then, my cell phone started ringing. It was a call from David. The sound of the phone's ringtone shattered the stillness of the interrogation room. It was David. The detective paused briefly, but she gave the okay to answer the call, given the situation. "Rachel, I'm going to the police station right now." "Sophia, she's safe now," the detective said in a soft tone. "Child Protective Services workers are taking care of things properly." As her words helped to lessen my worry just a little, there was a knock on the door of the room we were in. An investigator rushed in. A GPS tracker was recovered. The investigator held up a bag of evidence. The little device that was inside the bag made everything very clear. Tracking the serial number of the device, we found out who had bought it. I remembered that the purchase had been made with Elizabeth Martin's credit card. Suddenly, another officer came rushing into the space. Elizabeth Martin was at the station's main entrance, I was told. She was there to give herself up to the police. This sudden turn of events caused everyone in the room to freeze. The detective didn't waste a second and immediately took action. "Mrs. Martin, please stay here a bit longer," he said. About a quarter of an hour later, I was taken to another room. There I saw Elizabeth, and she was crying. Gone was the usual composure she always displayed. Instead, she just looked like a worn-out, elderly woman. "Rachel, I'm so sorry," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, almost unrecognizable from the Elizabeth I had once known. "It was all my fault." Elizabeth calmly began to describe her actions, but the details were crystal clear. The plot started when she found out I was pregnant. She used her contacts from her time as a bank branch manager to get assistance from an old coworker at the DMV. She had created the fake documents, which she timed perfectly with my due date. She'd also attached a GPS tracker when she borrowed my car keys and tracked where I was going. She was even aware of David's business trip, I realized. Elizabeth gave a small nod in response. The Shanghai project had been arranged through a contact from her banking career. Just then David walked into the room. He probably came straight from the airport, still pulling his suitcase behind him. "Mother, why?" he asked. There was more sorrow in his voice than anger. With shaking hands, Elizabeth took out an old photograph. It was of David's father, my father-in-law. I knew he had passed away a decade earlier. "I gave your father my word right before he passed away." Elizabeth's voice cracked with emotion. "He told me to always make sure our son was happy, but somehow that directive got all mixed up in my head." Clutching the photo, she kept talking. "David's marriage and new family should have made me happy, but a part of me couldn't bring myself to feel that way. Even our Sunday night meals felt hollow, like shallow connections. Her obsession with perfection had turned this warped love into a flawless scheme. The people at Rose Medical Center, the person at the DMV, the police reports timing, everything had been planned with precision. But when I heard Sophia sobbing, Elizabeth's voice shook. That little girl's cry ripped right through me. What was I doing? The detective calmly shut off the recording device. That's the end of the official statement. The following legal actions proceeded easier than they could have. Because Elizabeth confessed completely and cooperated fully, and because we chose to drop the charges, she got off with a suspended sentence. A week later, we were all in our living room. Elizabeth was on the couch, but she seemed distant. It was unsettling. She had just started her therapy. "Let's make a new pledge," I said, holding Sophia. This time we all promised together. David quietly sat down next to his mom. "I want you to never forget, Mom, the real meaning of the promise you made to Dad." Elizabeth hesitantly reached for Sophia. The small hand took hold of her finger. At that instant, something new seemed to spark in her gaze. Now I get it, I thought to myself. Elizabeth's voice didn't shake anymore. Keeping Joy safe isn't about being in charge. It's about guarding it carefully with affection. Across the glass, the snow from last week was slowly disappearing. Gentle sunshine poured in, signaling the start of a new season. Rachel. Elizabeth turned her attention to me. From this point onward, if we could be a real family. I silently agreed with her sentiment. A flawless family doesn't really exist. Perhaps a real family is about embracing each other's flaws and over time becoming even more tightly knit. The sound of that phone ringing during the questioning session seems like it happened ages ago. David gently put his arm around my shoulder while Elizabeth looked at Sophia. "Hey, Sophia," I murmured to my little girl. "You're bathed in so much affection. Even love that took the wrong path is finding its way back on track." The little one gave a small smile, as if she grasped it all. In the picture frame by the window, David's dad gave a serene smile. It was a tranquil afternoon, as though everything was finally settling into its rightful position. 3 months after that, one spring afternoon, we were exiting the courthouse. Elizabeth's last court appearance had concluded, and her suspended sentence was officially confirmed. The requirements were regular therapy appointments and limited contact with us. "So it's all done now," I mumbled quietly, sitting next to David as he drove. In the back, Sophia was sleeping soundly. Gazing at my daughter, asleep and looking so big already for just 3 months, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. The Denver Police's District 3 investigator had managed everything with great care, right up until the final steps. Because Elizabeth had confessed fully, showed genuine regret, and considering our desires, they had done their best to keep things as discreet as possible. They'd also made progress on the investigation of that ex-DMV employee, unearthing some internal issues. "Mom's counseling appears to be going well," David mentioned softly. During those weekly video calls, Elizabeth's face seemed to get a little less strained each time. She was gradually starting to talk about her feelings of loss and loneliness, things that had been hidden under her need for everything to be perfect. Our lives had found a new balance, too. The online store, which had been closed for a little while, was back up and running last week. We were getting more orders than before, and those nursing pillows we make by hand even have people waiting in line. Maybe the biggest difference was in how we feel about the neighborhood. After everything that happened, plenty of neighbors, and the Johnsons in particular, had reached out to help. Everyone fusses over Sophia at the block parties we have on the weekends. It's almost unbelievable, but our damaged trust is getting better thanks to our neighbors. On the drive back from the courthouse, we stopped at Whole Foods Market. We needed to grab the stuff for Elizabeth's recovery at home, which would kick off in a week. She'd be permitted to visit home with someone watching over her. "Isn't this your mother's favorite herbal tea?" I selected a box from the shelf. "Okay, so Mom, been really enjoying herbal tea recently," David said with a soft smile. As we walked toward the cashier, we stopped for a moment in the baby section. I spotted a tiny hat that grabbed my attention. The colors were similar to the blanket Elizabeth had made. "We should buy it," David suggested. "Mom will love it." When we got back, there was an email already there. It was from St. John's Church. The main priest had offered us a place to do some family counseling. Maybe we could move forward in that church where David and I had first met 3 years back. When evening came, we sat on the small deck outside in our yard. A nice, gentle spring breeze drifted through the peaceful, quiet Cherry Creek North neighborhood. "I wonder what's going to happen from here," I asked while holding Sophia. David leaned over and gently wrapped his arms around Sophia and me. "We'll just take things slowly, one step at a time. Instead of aiming for perfection, let's just be a family, flaws and all." Later that night, I phoned Elizabeth. It had been a while. "I'm looking forward to next week. Yes, this time we'll take it at a more relaxed pace." After I hung up, I looked into Sophia's room where David was reading her a story. His side profile looked exactly like that of the wonderful son Elizabeth had raised so carefully. Maybe the error of trying to have a perfect family somehow taught us the real definition of family. Even if it's not perfect, it's a journey we share, accepting that we aren't perfect. And we're at the start of this new path.